All right, gang, thanks for tuning in. It's Adrian. And today we're doing something completely different than fixing the weaknesses in a Ford Excursion. Today, I am smoking ribs. And I am smoking them in a very, very simple manner, but what some might consider to be unorthodox. I'm not going to use any probes. I am not going to wrap. I'm not going to sauce. These are good old-fashioned ribs. Very, very simple process. I'm using my Weber Kettle grill. That is what I am familiar with, and that is how I know how to control temperature. It's what I know as far as the temperature range where I need to be, and it is what I have the most experience on. I am learning how to cook meat over coals, and my very first barbecue was an electric smoker from Masterbuilt. And I thought that the Masterbuilt electric smoker, which was essentially set it and forget it, I thought that it was sufficient to put good smoke on chicken. And I thought it was sufficient to put good smoke on beef jerky. When it came to bigger, more dense cuts, ribs, pork shoulder, chuck roast, brisket, I thought that the smoke flavor was inadequate. And so I used that for probably 2 years and ended up getting rid of it. And that's when I started smoking on my Weber Kettle grill. Now, I don't think that the Weber Kettle grill is the best vessel to smoke meat, in which to smoke meat. However, it's what I have, and I do a lot of grilling. So over a 7-year period, I have figured out what tools or tricks or nuance I can add to that application that will work for me. And again, this is all in the age of Traegers and big green eggs and set it and forget it, and heat shields and deflector plates, probing meat, probing the grill temp, slow and sears, vortex, and I don't have anything against that stuff. I don't have any of it, and I have no problem with people that do use it, but I just choose not to use it. So I wanted to learn. I wanted to teach myself how to smoke meat on a Weber Kettle grill, and this is very simple. There are not a lot of steps. It's all about making sure the temperature stays within a certain range. And you know what? I don't even use chunks of wood or wood chips. I just use Royal Oak lump hardwood charcoal, and it puts on a very, very, very good smoke ring, and it gives incredible smoke flavor. So sit back and enjoy the video, and if you know someone that is wanting to learn how to smoke meat on a Weber Kettle grill, please share it with them. I would appreciate if you would like the video and subscribe to the channel. I'm not going to necessarily do a lot of cooking videos. I don't really cook, and certainly don't really cook in the house. However, I year-round do like to take advantage of that Weber Kettle grill and turn out all sorts of products. So anyway, thanks for tuning in, and enjoy the video. All right, so we got to get the membrane off these bad boys. I can remember being young and thinking younger and thinking this was such a daunting task. However, it's not that bad. So, get the ribs out. Now all we're going to do is find an opportunity over here. And we found that opportunity. And we are going to pull this membrane off the backside. Now, like I have said earlier, this is not a cooking channel, not intended to be a cooking channel. But I have found a very easy way for a beginner, which I consider myself, to make ribs. I get rid of the membrane on the beef ribs. I do not get rid of the membrane, or I get rid of the membrane on pork ribs. I keep the membrane on beef ribs. I think that it's easier to keep a beef rib moist with the membrane intact, and a pork rib is easier to get off. A pork membrane is easier to get off than the beef membrane. So I've got 4 slabs total, 2 slabs of baby back, and 2 slabs of St. Louis. This is another slab of baby back. This one again should be relatively easy. Just have to find an opportunity. Opportunity is presenting itself. And we will pull it right off. And one of the great tips for beginners, again, of which I consider myself, is making sure that this meat is room temperature. All right? All right. So now we have our St. Louis cut ribs. There's a flap on the back of the St. Louis ribs. Depending on the quality of the meat on that flap, and depending on how much connective tissue is on it, I will remove that. Sometimes you get a nice big piece, and I know that the purists always cut it off, but I bought these ribs. I paid for the meat. Make sure we eat it all. But if I can separate that meat, then I will, because it can make for a good snack. In order to maintain the integrity of consistency and cook time, take it off after a bit, and you got a nice little bite of meat. So anyway, we found another opportunity on the membrane. We're just going to pull it off. On St. Louis cut ribs, this is a little more challenging than it can be on the baby backs. And my hands are a gummy goopy mess right now. However, if you do struggle, you can always grab a paper towel and get a hold on the ribs. So go here to a corner, see if we can create opportunity. Looks like opportunity has presented itself. I'll just take this, try to get a good run open up. break it. And that is the membrane removal on St. Louis rack. Some of you might think it's a little white trash. I'm using a serrated knife to do so. That's fine. It is going to all taste the same at the end. All right, all membranes removed. Now it's time for seasoning. We're going to season the ribs, and I season. I don't necessarily rub. I have found that when I have made rubs, and I know it's not that hard to follow instructions, but I have found when I have made rubs that they are either too salty or too sweet, because I'm trying to get the right ratios. And I also do not like to use store-bought rubs, and I'm all for enterprise and endeavor, and I appreciate people that develop rubs. I do not like purchasing store-bought rubs because I do not like when it's got stuff, anti-caking agents. I think sodium dioxide's one in particular. I prefer just the season. So I think one of the things we see a lot are people using binders, and these ribs are wet, so whatever I put on them is going to stick. But a lot of times people do use binders. So if you'd like, you can put a little bit of mustard on, or Worcestershire sauce, or hot sauce, sriracha. You can even put a layer of barbecue sauce on as a binder. However, just keep in mind that whatever sugar you put on these are beginner ribs, and I am a beginner. Whatever sugar you put on these is going to have a tendency to burn, because these are going to be on coals for 5 or 6 hours. So I tend to keep a wet hand and a dry hand, and the wet hand is going to touch the seasoning, or the wet hand is going to be the one that's in contact with the ribs the whole time, and the dry hand is going to handle the seasoning. So the first thing I'm going to put on is salt. I salt these like I would salt a steak. All right? I'm literally going to salt high as if I was seasoning steak or pork chops. So the first one to go down is salt. Then I'm going to do pepper. For purposes of one-handedness, I'm going to use just white pepper. You good?
Yeah.
Okay. I like to use white pepper. I think white pepper is a little more spicy than black pepper. Next, we're going to do paprika. The way that we're going to cook these, they're going to get plenty of color, but I do like the essence of smoked paprika, and it will bring nice color. And then finally, garlic powder. And we're going to season. We are going to season both sides. And as you'll hear me say later, if we want to add any sweet, whether that is a basting with barbecue sauce or honey or apricot preserves, peach preserves, or even just dust some brown sugar on, we're going to do that later on after they've been on the coals for a little bit. So we just want to get this spread out. I think again, we're going to season it just like we would season steak. You can always add more, but we can never take away. This is my plate, or my tray of spares, St. Louis cut spare. I do love spare ribs. I like the rib tips. I like that big chunk of meat that you get by the sternum. However, I have got a wife and 5 children that are not crazy about the rib tips. So we do the baby back, which is, I guess, for the chicken lover, because it is a very neutral flavor. And we've also got the spare, the St. Louis spare, or the spare, which has, I guess you could say, a little more porky flavor. I got my daughter Kate running the camera. You want to say hi, Kate?
Hi.
How old are you, Kate?
I am 9 years old.
You're 9. What are some things that interest you?
Gymnastics, playing outside, and the nature and birds.
Nature and birds and gymnastics and playing. How long have you been doing gymnastics?
Since I was in kindergarten.
Kindergarten. And what grade are you in now?
3rd grade.
3rd grade. All right. So again, we season high like we're seasoning a steak. Allows us to get spread out. And it took me so long to come up with this system because I really wanted to come up with something that I thought was real easy for the individual that didn't have all the gadgets. And I've got nothing against gadgets. I think that being able to set it and forget it is cool. I think that being able to put probes in meat is cool because you can have it as close to perfect as possible. However, I like to figure things out, and so I have come up with this method that is as set it and forget it as I can make for my life and what I've got to get done when I have the time to do this. And that's why I think that this is the perfect way for a beginner, of which I am, perfect way for a beginner to learn how to do ribs. I've counted briquettes. I've offset the water. I have thrown in a brick to deflect heat. I have set up snakes and Z's and triangles, made mountains and valleys. I've put them on one side, I've put them on the other, the fire source that is. And I, after 7 years of trying to come up with a good system that works for people that have a setup similar to mine, I think that this is a good way to make ribs that have a smoke ring, that can be cooked over coals, that are tender, and if you want them to be fall off the bone tender, they can be that way. If you want to wrap them, you can wrap them. I'm not going to wrap these. I'm going to do it by look and feel, and then when I think we're close, I'll take a temperature reading. St. Louis cutter done. And we're going to move on to the baby back. There are some people that will say that they use mustard as a binder and it will help tenderize the meat. And there is vinegar and mustard and acid tenderizes. I'm not sure that in the limited time this acid has contact with this meat, if that is an agent of change when it comes to tender or not tender. However, I like a subtle flavor that it does add to the palate. I will probably not sauce these. They may be eaten with sauce. If I do sauce them, it will be just a very light glaze. I think it can add nice texture at the end. My wife and my daughters will eat them with sauce. They'll sauce them afterwards. But I enjoy and have satisfaction in the fruit of my labor, which is what I'm teaching in this video. And again, I'm not doing this to tell you that this is the best way, the only way. I'm merely trying to encourage someone that has a Weber kettle grill, that does not have probes, that might not have a slow and sear, that might not have the gadgets and gizmos and accessories and accoutrements that have become so prevalent in the barbecue market today. I have no problem with that. I just don't have any of it. And I always thought it was cool, and I can remember the first time I saw this was probably late high school or early college. And it was when the whole, not necessarily the cooking show, but the cooking show on the scene. You know, getting out and traveling. Diners, drive-ins, and dives, or, you know, top 10 barbecue, whatever. But I was always fascinated by a man down in South Carolina, big old boy. He he wore overalls and a t-shirt, but he was the man when it came to whole hog barbecue. And I was fascinated, completely fascinated by the fact that he was able to put his hand over a fire, over a bed of coals, and he could accurately predict the temperature of that. And I just thought that was fascinating. I just always had a lot of respect for those guys that didn't have tools and they didn't have accessories, but they knew how hot their fire was. They knew where the hot parts of the fire were. They knew where the cool parts of the fire were. They knew what needed to be where. They'd move their coals around. They'd shovel stuff around. And they, before social media, they were the masters, the pit masters. Shot of granulated garlic. All right, I have no idea what time it is, and I have no idea what time these will be done, but when they're done, They are going to be good, and they're going to be moist, they're going to be tender, and they're going to have a nice smoke ring on them. Good? All right, we got some background noise. You'll live. So this is what's left over of my last cook. I don't remember what it was. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring this basket, okay? This is the fanciest gadget I have. I bought this basket at Lowe's. It's a Weber basket. It was 20 bucks. I got 2 of them. What I'm going to do is I'm going to set this basket on that edge right there. I'm going to fill it up with all these coals and put some fresh coals in, and we're going to light that, okay? So I'm going to set this up. Kate, make sure it's set up properly, please.
There, that's good.
Again, I'm trying to make this as easy as possible so we are not worried about vents. I'm not worried about the quote-unquote thermometer that is on the unit. As long as that thermometer is within a range and we can tell by the feel of the ribs that they are getting the proper cook, then we're going to have really good ribs. You may not win any contests, but you'll make your wife and your kids happy. I'm not worried about cooking time. I'm not worried about fuel source. If I think it gets low, I'll add some more. Charcoal. I'm going to fill the baskets up as much as I can. These baskets are going to have to be refilled during the process. I know if you looking, you ain't cooking. However, we have to look. But it's all going to be worth it. The regular white paper to start the fire. The ink is not organic. We'll live. It has also been highlighted in some places. That will burn off before we ingest the chemical toxins. And I'm not necessarily a brand guy, but we are using Royal Oak lump charcoal because it is the best. You ready to rock and roll?
Yeah.
Okay.
Did she do that, Kate? I don't know. She's good at it.
Good job.
Yay, Sadie!
Practical skills day. We got 1 filming, and we got 1 striking matches, and we got 1 mowing. And we're going to do a backup just to make sure.
Just to make sure.
That's what we call a snafu. And that's what we call a scoop and score right there, baby. Lit it, dropped it, fell down, burnt up. Now we're lit. And we're going to let these coals get hot and burn up, and we're going to dump them, and we're going to put these ribs on. So this is what it's going to look like when we start. We got the basket. You don't have to have a basket. You can dump them on the side there, but I find a basket keeps everything contained. And then we've just got the rest of the grill. I'm going to dump the coals right here, and we're going to put the ribs right there. Because I've got limited space on the grill top, so I'm going to put one St. Louis across the middle, and then I'll put a baby back across the back, and I've got two different Webers set up. All right, Kate, I'm going to hand that off to you. Okay.
Got it.
So we're taking the coals. We're just going to dump them. Excessive heat right here. Excessive heat at all is not really our friend. However, it is going to take some to get this jump started. And part of the reason that we're going to have such a good smoke ring on these is that we're going to put fresh lump hardwood on these every hour or so, and that is going to create an opportunity for fire, which is going to create smoke. All right, scooch over here.
Okay. There.
Now I can spread these out a little bit. Okay. Put them on each side. I'm not even worried about getting the fire up to temp. Okay, I know there are some people that think you gotta get your coals, and you do, but not in this system. We want to make sure that we have all the embers off the grill, because that is going to be where our racks of ribs sit. Get this one cleaned off. Can you see me from over there, Kate?
I'm here. Let me
No, you're all right. You're all right.
Okay.
I didn't want to see. So much meat on this St. Louis cut that I'm going to put it, the big meat side towards the flame, or towards the coals. I'm going to put and because we've got the convection effect of this Weber kettle, I'm going to put the meatiest part of these ribs closest to. Don't want them to touch because we want airflow around every bit of it. And how you set these up for your presentation. So if you set them up here straight, they're going to be straight. They've got a little wiggle in them. They're going to have a wiggle for your presentation, if presentation matters for you. Okay? And we're going to go to the other grill. And there's your big meaty part. So we're gonna set that there. You see there's your smoke. That's the smoke we're gonna get on these ribs. And then again, we've got all this thick meat right here. We're going to put that up against, I guess you could say, the side of the Weber kettle, because that's where we'll get all of its heat. Okay? Now, we're going to cover these. And then, Kate, come on over here. I want you to show this right there.
Okay.
Now, I do not know how accurate this thermometer is on the grill, but I do know that for consistency's sake, if we're anywhere between that grill saying 350 and about 405, that's going to be the area, the heat that we need this to be in. Okay? So we put these down. I have no idea what time it is. We're going to come back and we're going to check them in about an hour. All right, so we dumped coals probably 10 minutes ago. So we're climbing on this side, and we're climbing on that side. Vents are just thrown open, all the way open. Don't have to worry about quarters, 3/4, whatever. The vents are all the way open. That's about 10 minutes in. All right, so this is about an hour, 40 minutes in. I wanted to check in on an hour, but we had to refuel the mower a couple times and had to settle a sandbox dispute, clean up a couple messes. So an hour 40 minutes, here's what we got. Pretty good color. Pretty good fire. Probably won't fill it up yet. All right. And the second one, pretty good color and pretty good fire, and I might toss some on that one. And again, have no idea how accurate those are, but consistency is more important than accuracy. Alrighty, we're at about 3 hours in, and the temperature is getting to the point where I'm going to add some fuel to this fire. Let's take a look. I did move the ribs around. That is the St. Louis. Those are the baby back. Okay. And the same in this one. We've got the St. Louis and the baby back. But I am going to put some more of these lump hardwood on each. And my guess right now is they're probably around 168 or 170, but I'm not going to take temperature. This is the point where most people, if they wrap, would wrap. I'm just going to put more fuel on. So we'll check back in a little bit. We're at the 4.5 hour mark. This temperature has dropped a little more than the other one, so I put on some more lump hardwood. And at this point, we got the St. Louis cut on the bottom, and we got the spare, or the baby back on top. I'm going to do just a little honey. That's the first thing I've added to these ribs. A little bit of honey. And I'm also going to do a little bit of salt. Now I have been moving these, I did move these closer. I did switch them and away from the fire. And if the outside was in, I tried to put the inside out. But again, this is 4.5 hours. Just put on some fresh lump and put on some honey and some salt. Over here, this one's been maintaining a little better, though I did take that off and add a little bit of more lump here as well. Again, we got the St. Louis in the front and the baby back in the back. Put a little bit more on that fire. But here we go with the honey. Some salt. Okay. Four and a half hours. We are at the 5.5 hour mark. You see the temperature is starting to go down. We're going to check these out. I'd say they've got pretty good bend. I have no idea what the internal temperature is. Don't really care what the internal temperature is. I'd say these are a success at 5.5 hours. Okay, so the moment of truth. We kept the ribs out of room temperature. Took the membrane off. We put a little bit of mustard on them. Seasoned them with salt, pepper, smoked paprika, and garlic powder. Then we loaded up the baskets with coals, or with lump charcoal. Started a chimney. Dumped the chimney on those, on the baskets. These were on for 5.5 hours. And we checked them at 1.5 hours. We had to add a little lump, hardwood, charcoal, and move them around. We checked again at 3 hours, did the same thing. Checked again at 4.5 hours, did the same thing. And now, at 5.5 hours, when we started smelling them, or at 4.5 hours, we put some honey and salt on them. And then at 5 hours, when we smelled them, we pulled them off. And now they've been sitting for about 20 minutes. So now we're going to pull them off. And we're going to cut them. And there's what they look like on the inside. Those are the St. Louis style. And we're going to cut open. So a pretty good smoke ring. You got a good shot of that, Kate? Don't move it.
Okay. Yeah, I see it.
Okay. And now the baby back. Rickety tables don't help. Got a good shot of that smoke ring?
Yep.
Okay. Delicious. Now, we're going to see, check the pull. Close to fall off the bone, but not quite fall off the bone. I'd say that's a success.